Welcome back to Liberating Generations podcast, everybody. This is a podcast about healing intergenerational trauma, and joining me is my lovely daughter, part of the intergenerations of my family, Regan Claire. Hi, Regan.
Hi, Mom. So good to see you.
So good to see you. This topic that we're talking about today came up because of the pandemic.
Mhm.
And as we know, research is just starting to explore all of the threads that are going to be the tapestry of what has changed us as humans because of the pandemic.
Mm.
Everywhere from babies not being able to read people's faces in public because of masks. And I'm not saying masks are bad. I think they're great and
Mhm.
important, but just these different things, right?
Mhm.
uh, Kids being homeschooled, and parents that weren't prepared to do that. The
Mhm.
way that we work now, all of it, the economy has shifted. There's a lot of this, right?
Mhm.
Part of, I think, what I've witnessed in medical care and for you in schooling, you know, I was also in a graduate school program when the pandemic hit and left
Mhm.
because it was just online. I'd moved to the town to Portland, Oregon, where it was. And then it was just like, why am I here? I can do this from home. I'm
Mhm.
just going to be on Zoom, right?
Right.
Yeah. Your school did the same thing for a period of time,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Mhm.
So a lot of us, you and I took to the mountains. We started taking our dogs out for very, very long hikes, and that was really therapeutic.
Mhm.
But some people suffered and struggled a lot because of the lack of social gathering. And
Mhm.
I think part of one of those threads I was talking about with research that we're noticing is social support is really important.
Mhm.
We can go to all kinds of quotes about no man is an island, and all and then down to the biology of oxytocin and what happens when we get touched. And
Yeah.
I've heard that, I don't know about you, from so many people, including you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know about me. I'm like Miss Physical Touch over here.
Yeah. 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 And so one of the things that happened in my medical practice is we were already going online before the pandemic hit, and then it sort of trained our patient population that you don't actually have to come into the office, that we can do this on Zoom because there's a lot of teaching. However,
Mhm.
a lot of my patients said things like, I miss the hugs at the end of our visits,
Yeah.
right? I
Mhm.
miss that in-person field that's created when two or more people gather in a space.
Yes.
And so one of the things that you have definitely participated in is monthly retreats
Mm.
at Tara House, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And and it's been so incredible to see people come out of their little shell and
Mhm.
just sort of like, oh, it feels
Mhm.
so good to be with each other again, to
Mhm.
touch, to have all of this, right?
Mhm.
So we came up with 10 reasons why retreats are a very important part of healing.
So.
And yeah, and it's healing trauma, reversing autoimmunity, dealing with cancer, like all of these different things, healing addiction.
Mhm.
You just you can't do it by yourself in isolation.
No.
What's your
No.
experience of being in isolation?
Mm. Well, first of all, I think all of the research that's come out since COVID, that the populations of people who suffered the most were older people, older folks who maybe were in homes, who didn't have access to seeing their families, seeing their loved ones. And they really suffered because of that. And then there's also the youngest generation of people also really struggled. because as you said, I mean, it could be because they weren't being able to read facial expressions, they weren't able to socialize with their friends. It's such a incredibly important developmental stage, just being taken away from that network, from learning that these very important skills.
Mhm.
So these generations struggled the most. And my experience with isolation is an interesting one. Well, first of all, within recovery, it's like, like the message is you can't recover alone, right? You recover out loud, you recover in community because I mean, healing in community is one of the most important things that I have done in my own healing journey. It has been truly. And something that COVID, I think, what made us kind of wake up to was that need for community. It's so important. And I think 2019, 2020, and even going into 2021 and 2022, as people were, I mean, we still see people kind of struggling with the
Yes.
backlash from COVID. People are still very much trying to kind of grapple with everything that happened. And the beauty in that is that it caused all of these things to come to the surface, the things that maybe we'd been shoving down or shadows that we hadn't wanted to look at for a very long time. They were kind of right in front of our faces. At least that was my experience. And so while that was really hard, and I think the part of it being in isolation made it even more difficult, now we're seeing this awakening of sorts. People are, it's so beautiful. There's a movement happening where people, they've seen like the depths of how low they can go. And now it's like, okay, I'm taking control of my healing of my life and I'm stepping into my power and whatever that looks like. And so, yes, the retreats that we do that you lead at Tara House are, I mean, absolutely incredible. They've been such a major part of my story as well. We can obviously go into that.
So why don't we come back to our 10 reasons why this works and we'll dip back into this, right?
Mhm,
Okay. So number 1,
mhm,
takes you out of your schedule and away from all of your distractions when you go
mhm.
somewhere, right?
Yes. Yes. Specifically, I want to touch on when you're in your normal routine, in your regular environment, you don't have an agreement made. You might have an agreement made depending on the community you surround yourself with, but typically it is not a a normal thing for you to have agreements with the people around you that you are going to raise each other up and try to be the best versions of yourself and and try to hold one another accountable. That's not typically the way that we see uh, relationships going in America, I would say. So when you go into a retreat setting, it's kind of this beautiful little container that doesn't have, as you said, any distractions. It's you're away from your normal routine and you're among like-minded individuals who have agreed to these points that I'm coming into this space to actively work on myself and I want to be facilitated in that healing.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm thinking of the 2 generations you and I represent. So when you just said that about there's typically not an agreement, and I'm thinking about the default settings that the mind can go to. And in my generation, what I see a lot of the women and the men in my age group is they're witnessing the aging of their parents and then also the crises of their coming of age adult children. And they're right in the middle, like the bologna in the sandwich. And so they're there's a lot, and I think I hear a lot. It's just one thing after another. I can't get my breath. I can't catch a break. I can't even put myself, forward and
Mm,
first and take care of myself. And so that's what I hear.
mhm.
What do you hear from yours as sort of a default?
Mm, depends on it really depends on the environment that I'm in. I would say, back in Seattle, I think I'm surrounded by a lot of people more in your age demographic. That tends to be the type of community that I surround myself with. But being back at school where I am kind of around people in their early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, um, I think a common thing that I hear is I'm just doing the best I can. There's a lot of excuses, I would say, and we call it lazy mind. Yeah, kind of just a lot of lazy mind mentality. Uh, of we have it really hard in our age demographic. Things are more expensive nowadays. It's harder to come across a job. um we're going through something that our parents never had to go through, and so therefore I have a right to act the way that I'm acting. So that's kind of what I see a lot of in my age demographic,
Okay. Interesting and unhelpful, right?
and unhelpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because
That's
I
like,
have it hard, then I have an excuse for acting the way I'm acting.
mhm.
Yeah.
All right. So the first one is taking you out of that soup, right? The
Mhm.
soup of whatever the background chatter is, the themes that are going around in your head that are part of whatever environment you're in.
Mhm.
Number 2, what's the second one?
It's self-care. Yeah. We talk I think we have another episode about what self-care means, and just to briefly reiterate what we kind of said with self-care, it's not I think we can get confused about self-care meaning I'm gonna go and treat myself to getting my nails done, and, I'm gonna go out for drinks with friends after a hard week. I think oftentimes
Having a glass of wine is
yeah.
self-care.
Yeah, our culture capitalizes on self-care.
Yeah.
It's like,
I just bought myself this pretty thing from Amazon because I'm indulging in
because
self-care.
I work hard and I deserve it.
I
Yeah.
had a hard day. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of that mentality, a lot of it. And getting out of it, it can be pretty difficult. It's a thought loop that you actively have to kind of look at and say, "Oh, where's that coming from?" And Uh, I absolutely bought into that for the longest time. For the longest time, I thought,
I
"Yes,
was fed my sugar addiction in my 20s and 30s. Had a hard day. I deserve a Reese's.
yes, yeah, exactly, exactly."
Yeah.
So, self-care, I think stepping outside of the framework of what society wants to capitalize on, is so important, and I think really getting in touch with, like, self-care being something that you do to feed your body, mind, soul, that's what you have to really sit with. And it looks different for every single person. I know for you and I, it's getting out into the forest and hiking for many, many miles and meditating. For you, it's reading. You're an avid reader, and yeah, it looks different for every person.
There's actually a little motivation that's underneath that will be the same for everyone if they're really engaged in self-care. And that is that there's a level of compassionate self-confrontation
Mhm.
with the idea of moving into self collaboration between all of your parts and your systems.
I
And
love that.
so self care is that is that willingness to create a committee out of all of the parts of you. And
Mhm.
I mean, that's very difficult to do on your own because the mind that creates the problem, you can't make solve the problem.
Yeah.
And so I call it borrowing a brain to come to retreat. And then that moves us to our third one, which is you get to do a group process
Mhm.
where at our retreats, where you're watching as I facilitate other people in their process. And then you go, oh, I didn't even realize that that was one of my things too.
Yeah.
Because what you get when you're not in isolation
Mhm.
and you break the idea that you're unique
Mhm.
and you're ruminating thought loops,
Yeah.
then you get to really witness that, oh, okay, I am not alone in this.
Mhm.
And there is a way to move from the way that my child mind decided to react to things
Mhm.
to become a skillful responder to
Mhm.
life's inevitable challenges, right?
Yes.
To be able to accept the truth that life is meant to have challenges around every corner. You know, you're not meant to catch a break, actually.
Mhm.
You're supposed to actually be growing as you go, right?
Mhm.
And the times when we have a nice coasting time of life, that's the time when you're supposed to rest and gather your strength for the next one. And
Mhm.
I think just the acceptance that that's how life works, because you can witness nature in its cycles of seasons, right?
Yeah.
Spring always follows winter, and summer always follows spring, and fall always follows summer. And there's an energy to each one of those cyclical turnings of the wheel.
Mhm.
And so if we realize we're part of that, accept it as it is, then when the next challenge comes along, we can say, okay, what am I meant to learn here? You know, and we can confront it with this curiosity that actually allows for even a little bit of a feeling of adventure. Like, oh, I get to explore my mind. I get to stretch it. I get to create a new skill. This is exciting.
It's also
So,
empowering.
mhm.
It's so empowering to be able to track your growth as well. Um, right? Yeah, of a challenge, of engage in a challenge coming up and being able to move with it, move through it with grace rather than resistance, and being able to see older versions of yourself who would not have been as skillful. So it's a very empowering process.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you were raised by a cupboard slamming mother who, when she get frustrated, would slam cupboards. Yeah, and now I think back to her and I go, "Oh, you poor little
Yeah,
sweetheart. Your level of frustration was just set so fine-tuned."
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of resilience. I was raising 4 small children and,
Mhm.
there's just that resilience had a limit to it in the way that I thought about things when in fact it actually doesn't. And
Yes.
so, yesterday I was playing with putting a sprinkler head on a hose. And and it was you watched me do this before where I'll talk to the inanimate object and go, "You're not gonna beat me, so I'm here for the duration."
Yeah.
And I'll take a big deep breath and I'll say, "All right, what needs to happen here to make this work?"
Mhm.
I changed my own shower head last week. Got, like all these different things that when I was younger, I would have been probably swearing during the time.
Talk about an intergenerational component piece too, because that's how you were raised. Your father did that, my grandpa. Yeah.
He used to throw hammer through the sheetrock when the sheetrock wouldn't line up properly. He
Mhm.
would have a temper tantrum while he was building.
Yeah,
And
so I hope you
yeah,
feel empowered
I
about
do.
the
I do.
intergenerational trauma that you have stopped.
Yep. Yep.
It ended with you.
Yep. And just to be able to create that gap between, okay, this isn't working the way you expected it to, create a gap and witness what can be new here, right? There can be some
Mhm.
patience and some skillful responding instead of frustration and annoyance. And so just shifting that and creating a gap to be able to do that and watch it happening is really cool. You learn that in retreat, everybody. You learn how to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and there are all kinds of maps and tools that I teach and how to do that. And you do it one spot at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, something that was kind of coming up, I think another beautiful thing about retreat setting is, like I said about the whole agreeing, you're all agreeing to be there, you're all agreeing to actively be working on your shadows
Mhm.
together. And I think out in the real world, it's so important. This was just coming up today. A friend and I went hiking, and she was kind of talking to me about how people tend to trauma dump on her and how she doesn't have the space, she doesn't have the capacity to hold it all. And so I think what's so beautiful about a retreat setting is this is a container that is actively there to hold whatever you bring to it.
Right.
And it is community that is just, I mean, at the end of the retreat, community that is built in. It comes with the integration process. And so,
Yeah, you come not knowing each other, and then you're besties by the time you leave.
yeah.
And you have this great community of support, which
So
is our
it's,
next
oh,
little reason, which is the
mhm,
holding container,
yes. Yeah.
right?
Mhm,
Yeah, a holding container is created where trauma dumping
yeah.
is actually, there's a way of doing it and it's
Mhm,
facilitated, and you get
right.
to watch your own way that you put together your story and then go back and heal the one who made meanings and beliefs
Mhm,
in response or reaction against events in childhood, which
mhm,
then created what were adaptive behavior responses at the time, which are now maladaptive.
mhm,
And so you get this great opportunity to go back and heal that little one,
mhm,
heal the meaning, heal the belief, give them a skillful response instead of a reaction. And then it
mhm,
changes your behavior. You can't just say, I'm going to change my behavior. It never works. Anyone who has
mhm.
ever tried to quit drinking, who has ever tried to lose 20 pounds, who has ever tried to do anything that where a behavior has to be changed, you can't work on it from the behavior.
No.
You can't. You have to heal the one who was using that behavior
Mhm.
as an adaptive strategy to cope with stress,
Yep.
some kind of trauma. And it has now been outgrown. It's maladaptive now. And
Mhm,
so the whole thing has to be healed. And that holding container that we create is this beautiful, safe place for that to occur.
mhm.
And you get witnessed by other people who at the same time get theirs healed and they go, "Oh," you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you get 8 for the price of 1.
Yeah, truly.
That's what everyone always says. I came here and I didn't even know what I was gonna work on. I didn't even think I had anything. And now, and
Yeah.
so yeah,
Typically, it's pretty yeah, it's pretty amazing how that happens, how whatever group you end up in, it's always perfect. It's
it is always.
perfect.
Yes. Well, then this takes us to another one of the reasons, which is uh, from holding container to the field that is generated, the energy field. This is kind of a cool concept, isn't it?
Mhm,
So Rupert Sheldrake, I often use his work that he started with plants as a plant biologist.
mhm,
And he noticed that they create an energy field between them as they communicate. There's a book called Secret Life of Trees. And,
mhm. So cool.
it's research that shows that the trees communicate with each other. If there's a sick tree, the others will send carbohydrates to their root system to that one, and so there's this morphogenetic field that humans have also that we contribute to, whether we know it or not.
Mhm.
And you get an opportunity to witness, like, what am I contributing to the field? Is it a bunch of garbage?
Right.
Right. And I'm just taking from the field instead of generating something into it. And so you get to learn how to watch what the field feels like and to know that you're a a very important node in that energy field. And I had a near death experience one time many years ago where I saw the field. And for the very first time in my whole life, I came back knowing that this life was so important.
Mhm.
And there was no longer like self development, growth, healing, evolution out of my small beliefs and patterns from childhood. It was no longer optional, it was mandatory because I saw that each of the nodes that represented a person, those that were dim, were creating weakness in the field. And
Mm.
that field was actually what was holding, life on planet Earth, part of it. So it was really fascinating. I saw that basically our divinity and
Mhm.
that we had to do this. And so I came back going, oh my gosh, no longer is this optional. This is mandatory.
Mhm.
So when you come to retreat, you're learning how to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. All right. So another one is one that you contribute to often, learning to
Cooking.
cook. Learning to cook.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, it's yeah, the food that we serve in retreat setting is always so nourishing, and it's also easy to make, easy to replicate when you go home. You go home with a list of recipes that you get to start playing around with in your own kitchen, and so fascinating being back at school. And it's I'm in chiropractic school, alternative medicine, and the stuff that they feed us in, like, what they have available in the cafe, it's
The
tons of
hospitals too.
yeah, at the hospitals too. It's so yeah, it's full of everything has caffeine, sugar, it's gluten, nothing is organic. And I'm like, wait a second, like, what food isn't food kind of the foundation of everything? What we put in our mouths, that is that's everything. If we're not eating things that are nourishing our bodies, then how the hell are we supposed to operate?
Mhm.
How are we supposed to function? And so, yeah, this is a really great environment of having a first step of, I mean, just the education aspect of it as well, because I didn't realize that so many people just aren't educated on this very real topic.
Or they're anxious too, and there's a lot of kitchen anxiety, and we demystify the belief that you have to spend all day in the kitchen to eat
Right.
healthy. And
Right.
my cookbook is, the autoimmune paleo cookbooks,
Yeah.
anti-inflammatory recipes with 7 ingredients or less for busy people. And the objective of writing that thing was because I wanted people to know that I don't spend all day in the kitchen.
No, you don't. Yeah.
No, I do not. And so what people get to do in retreat is see my routine, your
Mhm.
routine, how we do this, how we fold it in, and how really little time it takes. So, you know, if I don't have time to do batch cooking for the week with meal prep, there are ways that you can do a week that doesn't have anything
Mhm.
unhealthy in it. And
Mhm.
then when you have a weekend day or a weekday where you can batch cook, then and meal prep, then it's just a few hours in the kitchen on one day. And then you're all
Mhm.
set for the rest of the week. Yeah.
Yes.
So you get to
Yeah.
learn how to do that, how we do it.
Mhm.
Demystification of healthy food prep.
Mhm. Yeah.
Another aspect of coming to retreat is you get me on all waking hours. So, one-to-one time if you choose to get up at 6 in the morning and go. I had the last retreat, I had one of my health coaching students actually, for the very first time, I had someone do this, come to the top of the mountain with me in the morning, and
Mhm.
she just asked me questions the entire time, and I answered them the entire time.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, so it's a really nice way of being able to come with all your questions,
Mhm.
learn again how to fold things in, get things answered that maybe you've been wondering about. So you
Mhm.
get some one-on-one time. That's really nice.
Yes.
Another
That's
one is the
the wealth of
hands-on.
knowledge.
How what's that?
You're a wealth of knowledge. It's yeah.
Another one is the hands-on pulse diagnosis from Ayurveda. That's
Mhm.
always really nice, and I can do in person, you and I'll sit and type people for the Enneagram when they want to ask those questions,
Mhm.
because online quizzes are not accurate, and, I'm trained in the narrative tradition, and I've taught you how to do that where you ask the question, the
Mhm.
next follow-up question is based on the answer from the question before, so you can't do a quiz,
Right.
right? It's a finding out motivation from your narrative, from your story.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so all that can happen in person.
I mean, yeah. Are you taking participants still? Am I able to sign up for the next retreat?
You betcha, you're always welcome.
You're talking me into it.
You're supposed to come back and cook for it.
It's true. Yes. Yes. I'll
All
check
right,
that.
and
No,
then
actually, there's one in September. I think I will be back for.
yay!
Yay.
And then, I think the last one that we had down was there's a binder from the 4 retreats throughout the year. I do these retreats
Mhm.
quarterly. So we have 2 different kinds of retreats. We do the 3.5 day one where we cook for you. You come hiking with me in the morning. We do pulse diagnosis. We do the Enneagram. We do all of that.
Mhm.
And that one, has a lot of time built into it. It is more expensive. You get a binder that we give you the filling for each one of the retreats you come to of the 4. So then you have this textbook by the time you're done. And then we do monthly ones that are plant medicine based. And
Mhm.
that all that other stuff is not there, right?
Mhm.
It's a whole different thing. It's a lot less expensive.
Mhm.
And the plant medicine actually allows you to go faster.
Yeah. They both you'll get to where you need to go. The
Yep.
plant medicine exactly kinda just gets you along a
But
little
not
quicker.
everybody is comfortable with that. And
Mhm.
so we have alternatives to psychedelic medicine, so non-psychedelic medicines. So we have both options, but they
Oftentimes,
are
people will start out doing the 3-day retreat, and then they'll go to a plant medicine lunch if they feel called to it.
right. Yes, exactly. So, any other things about retreats? They're our favorite thing. We love them.
I love retreats. I wanna go to a retreat right now.
I always feel so inspired by the courage people have
Ugh,
to
I
come
know.
to a retreat because there's always anxiety. It does not matter. Everybody, whether it's a plant medicine one or not, or otherwise, they're coming into a foreign energy field. They're unsure what's going to happen. And all of us, our biggest addiction is to control. So they
Yeah.
don't know like what they can't control everything. And so it's anxiety provoking. And then when they leave, they're open and happy. I mean, it's just amazing.
I love seeing the afterglow of
Oh, it's so nice.
these
And they have
retreats.
integration steps, so you don't go back into your hectic schedule without that. You have the support of the community, the integration steps, and right. So,
That I think is what I really wanna drive home is the integration piece of it
yeah,
and having community, that you can reach out to who they've seen your process. I mean, I think just in these few short days, you get to know people on a much deeper level than
yeah,
oftentimes of the people in your day to day.
yes, for sure. You
Yeah.
get to see and be seen.
Yes.
A lot
And
of
that's
intimacy.
all we really all want, right?
Yep.
It's a very heart open experience. And in a culture where we're taught to be hearts guarded, hearts
Yeah.
blocked, shields up, masks on,
Yes.
it's a really refreshing environment to be a part of.
All right. Well, I can't wait for you to fly back up for the next one. Everybody, we'll put in the show notes when the next retreat is. And we just encourage you to,
Yes.
if you want to really accelerate your healing of your trauma, this is
Mhm.
by far the fastest way to do it.
Yes. You won't regret it. It's so nice. I
All
love
right,
it.
everyone. Until next time, be well.